This is my video presentation on the analysis of movies focused on the reform movements of the mid-1900s. My name is Isaiah Nelson, and this is for my History 7 History Through Film class. So some background knowledge that is needed for this presentation. For nearly a century following the end of the American Civil War, America was troubled by problems regarding race. Laws such as the Jim Crow laws had crippled the social mobility of African Americans. Now, in the LGBT community, they were discriminated on the basis of their sexuality. This included, for both groups, things in education, public spaces, housing, etc. On the global scale, in South Africa, apartheid embodied many similarities to the problems of America, as the African-born, dark-skinned people of that nation faced discrimination in almost every aspect of society. All of this led to multiple reform movements in each of these areas in the mid-1900s. So the movies that will be compared in this presentation are I'm Not Your Negro, 2016, a documentary directed by Raoul Peck based on the unfinished manuscript of James Baldwin, Selma, 2014, which is a film directed by Ava DuVernay and focuses on Martin Luther King Jr. and his battle for the enfranchisement of Black people in Selma, Alabama. Milk, 2008, which is a film focusing on the story of Harvey Milk's political fight for gay communities' rights in California. And Mandela, The Long Walk to Freedom, which focuses on Nelson Mandela's journey to battling apartheid in South Africa. So the takeaways from Selma 2014. The fight for equality of African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement was a hard-fought battle. This is demonstrated by the first attempted march over the Pettus Bridge. Now, for some contextual information, in Selma, Alabama, there had been the shooting of Jimmy Williams. He was a Black African American peaceful protester who was shot by an Alabama police officer, even though he didn't pose any real threat. This inspired the first march over Pettus Bridge. Now, Martin Luther King Jr. was not present at this march. Instead, two of his constituents were leading it. And when they marched over the bridge, they were met by a police blockade. In the film Selma, Ava DuVernay recaptures this moment in the clip that I'm about to show.
Things just gonna have to wait.
There's no word to be had.
Major Cloud, may we speak with you?
Troopers, advance!
$70 million people are watching this.
The first 10 or 20 Negroes were swept to the ground, screaming, arms and legs flying, packs and bags went skittering across the grassy divider. Those still on their feet retreated. A cheer went up from the white spectators lining the south side of the highway. The troopers continued pushing, using both the force of their bodies and the prodding of their nightsticks.
So the essential takeaways from that clip is that in the South, especially Black African Americans faced hardships and discrimination and essentially abuse from white people. This means that Selma accurately portrays the hardships that the civil rights movement activists face, as you just saw in the clip that I showed. DuVernay goes to almost making clips uncomfortable to watch to exemplify the hardships that Black people faced. This is further proven accurate by Tish Chaucer when he says whites and blacks lived in two vastly unequal communities in the South. He said this in his Jim Crow Laws paper. So the takeaways from I Am Not Your Negro. James Baldwin, who wrote the manuscript that I Am Not Your Negro is based off of, sought to create a commentary on the poor treatment of blacks in America. He wanted to deconstruct the lies that white people had been perpetrating in media at the time. His claims are reinforced through Peck's unique editing style. Peck used a combination of almost a montage style of clips and still images that displayed the abuses that blacks faced. For example, in the movie, there were clips in which black people were being beaten by police officers with their nightsticks for doing pretty much nothing. And an example of black people being misrepresented in the media was in a clip that I Am Not Your Negro shows of the Defiant Ones. In this clip, it shows a black man and a white man who, throughout the movie, are conflicting over their ideals. But when the black man has the chance to escape on a train, and the white man cannot get on the train, the black man jumps off the train. Baldwin comments on this and says that it's wholly inaccurate, as it was meant to comfort white people and to assure them that black people did not hate them. Baldwin's assertions about the treatment of black people is true as it is proven by Christopher Bishop's paper when he describes black people as facing a century of second-class citizenship. This was, of course, a result of Jim Crow laws and discrimination from white people. So takeaways from Milk 2008. Milk 2008 shows that the reform movements of the late 1900s mainly focused on the gay community, and that a key part of this movement was Harvey Milk and his services to the gay community of California. He helped to show that just people in general, could hold offices and be effective, as he passed an ordinance that allowed for equality, that essentially removed all discrimination based on sexual orientation in California. And the movie is accurate as it does stay true to the story of Harvey Milk. In Robert B. Rittinger's paper titled Harvey Milk, in which he describes the life of Harvey Milk, the movie and the paper follow the same sequence of events. The only exception to the movie's accuracy is the implied sexuality of Dan White, whose picture is at the bottom left corner. In the movie, it is implied throughout the movie that Dan White might have actually been gay, or at least in the closet, and as a result, he's homophobic towards Harvey Milk, which eventually results in him assassinating Milk, along with a number of other factors. Now, whether or not this is true is unknown, so while it's not inaccurate, it's not necessarily accurate either. So takeaways from Mandela, The Long Walk to Freedom, in 2013. It shows that activists are willing to sacrifice almost everything to achieve their goals. And even though the movie does not take place in America, its principles can be applied to American activists, because Nelson Mandela, the main character of the movie, who is played by Idris Elba, is in prison for 27 years, almost 3 decades. This is true, as Nelson Mandela was in prison for almost 3 decades as well in reality. This can be applied to activists such as Martin Luther King Jr., who were arrested on a constant basis during his peaceful protests in America. And Emil Crosby describes the tactics of peaceful protesting and sit-ins that got Martin Luther King Jr. arrested. Now, while for Martin Luther King Jr., he was often released only after a night in jail, it's still applicable to Mandela's situation, as both were willing to risk their freedoms to stand up for what they believed in. So, comparison of the movies in terms of their filmmaking styles. I'm Not Your Negro is a documentary rather than your traditional sense of a movie. The movie, as I mentioned, uses a unique editing style of a montage of different clips and clips and still images to prove its points. This can be compared to montages that you can find on YouTube today. The other 3 films, however, are traditional films in the sense that they have a cast that we, the audience, follow over a course of certain events. Each follows a traditional 3-act story structure with time jumps at key intervals. All 4 movies, however, are accurate to the events they're displaying, and each focuses on the topic of reform. So, in order to understand these movies, it's important to understand the times in which they were produced. All 4 movies were produced in the presidency of Barack Obama in the U.S. Now, this may seem insignificant, but it's actually significant because under the presidency of Barack Obama, it brought in a new era of films in which films sought to display the past for what it truly was. As Donald Bogle and John Singleton asserted, Django Unchained and 12 Years a Slave had stripped the past plantation film of its romanticism of slavery. This is important as it shows that this era of films focused on showing the past for what it truly was without any romanticism of it. This is why movies such as Selma or I'm Not Your Negro properly comment and display how blacks were actually treated in the mid-1900s. Without this era, the production of these movies might not have even been possible, as the subject matter that they focus on and their treatment of the subject matter might not have been ever produced had it not been for this era. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that you learned something while watching my presentation.